The wedding invitations scattered across the hardwood floor like autumn leaves, their elegant cream paper mocking me as I watched Sophie's hands deliberately knock over the carefully arranged stacks. Her lips curved into that practiced smile, the same one she'd been using to manipulate my father for the past 8 months. "Oh, I'm so clumsy," she cooed, not bothering to bend down and help me gather the 100-plus invitations I'd spent hours organizing. "Laura, sweetie, I'm sure you can sort these out again. You're so good at managing things." "I'm Laura, and I manage a lot more than just things. I manage my sister's wedding preparations, my father's slow descent into alcoholism, and my growing urge to wipe that smirk off Sophie's face. But right now, I had to manage my temper." "These were in alphabetical order," I said, keeping my voice steady as I collected the scattered cards. "Emma needs them delivered tomorrow." Sophie perched herself on the edge of my father's antique desk, her red stilettos dangling carelessly. "Mark won't mind if they're a little late. He barely knows half these people anyway." "Emma minds. It's her wedding." "Your sister's always been particular, hasn't she?" Sophie twirled a strand of her perfectly highlighted hair. "Almost obsessive, really, like your mother was." My hands froze over the invitations. Sophie knew exactly what she was doing, dropping my mother into the conversation like a poison pill. I forced myself to keep sorting, even as my fingers trembled with rage. My phone buzzed, a text from Ethan. "Need backup? I can be there in 10. Before I could respond, Sophie's heels clicked across the floor. She stopped at the doorway, then turned back. "Oh, and Laura, I noticed you didn't include Caroline Matthews on the guest list. Mark's oldest friend? I took the liberty of adding her." "Caroline isn't invited," I said through gritted teeth. "Dad specifically asked that she not be included." "Did he? Must have slipped his mind when we discussed it last night, over wine." Sophie's smile widened. "He signed the invitation himself. Funny how alcohol affects memory, isn't it? The implications hit me like a slap. Sophie had gotten my father drunk to manipulate him into inviting the woman he'd had an affair with while my mother was dying. The woman whose presence at the wedding would devastate Emma. My phone buzzed again. Maya this time. "Found something about Sophie. Need to talk ASAP." Sophie watched me check my phone, her eyes gleaming with interest. "Your little investigative journalist friend seems quite devoted to you. Always checking up, always digging around." The threat in her voice was clear as crystal. "Get out of my father's study," I said, standing up slowly, "and stay away from my sister's wedding preparations." "Or what, Laura?" Sophie stepped closer, dropping her sugary facade. "You'll tell Daddy, he's too far gone to care. You'll warn Emma, she's too wrapped up in her perfect wedding to notice anything's wrong. Face it, you're the only one who sees me for what I am, and nobody will believe you." She was right. I'd been watching her isolate my father, manipulate my sister, and systematically destroy our family for months. But I had something Sophie didn't know about. Proof. Maya's message burned in my pocket like a lit fuse. "We'll see about that," I said, meeting her gaze. Sophie's smile never wavered, but something flickered in her eyes. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. Good. She should be afraid. As her heels clicked down the hallway, I looked at the scattered invitations, including the one addressed to Caroline Matthews in my father's drunken scrawl. Sophie had just made her first real mistake, and I intended to make it her last. I picked up my phone and texted Maya back. "Whatever you found, I'm ready. It's time to end this." The wedding was in 3 weeks. Sophie had no idea what was coming for her. Maya's coffee sat untouched as she slid her phone across the cafe table. "Look at this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sophie Thompson doesn't exist, at least not before 2 years ago." I stared at the screen, scanning through social media profiles that dead-ended in 2021. "That's impossible. Dad met her at his law firm's charity gala. She works in real estate." "Worked," Maya corrected, pulling up another document. "Every company she listed on her resume either doesn't exist or has never heard of her. And that charity gala? I checked with the firm. They didn't host one last year." The cafe's ambient chatter faded to white noise as I processed this. She's been lying to everyone, to Dad, to Emma. There's more. Maya hesitated, glancing around before continuing. 3 different men in the past 5 years filed restraining orders against someone matching her description. Different names, same MO. She gets close to wealthy men going through personal crises, isolates them from family, then... My phone buzzed. Emma's face lit up the screen. Hey, Em. Laura, thank God. Emma's voice cracked. Can you come to Dad's? Something's wrong with him. He's not making sense. I was already grabbing my coat. What happened? Sophie said he's been drinking since morning. She tried to take his keys, but he got angry. He's saying he wants to cancel the wedding, that he can't afford it anymore. My blood ran cold. Dad had already paid for most of the wedding. The vendors were booked, deposits made. I'm on my way. Don't let him leave. And Emma, don't let Sophie handle any paperwork or checks. Nothing. Maya followed me out, already pulling up her rideshare app. I'm coming with you. We found Emma on the front steps, mascara streaking her cheeks. Inside, Sophie's voice carried from Dad's study, syrupy, sweet, and reasonable. Mark, darling, just sign here. I'll take care of everything. I burst through the door. Dad slouched in his leather chair, a half-empty whiskey bottle on his desk. Sophie stood over him, manicured hand extending a document. Get away from him, I snapped. Sophie's smile didn't waver. Laura, sweetie, your father's just feeling overwhelmed. I'm helping him simplify things. I snatched the paper from her hand, a power of attorney form. My hands shook as I read it. You're trying to get control of his accounts while he's drunk? Laura? Dad's voice was slurred. When did you get here? Sophie's right, I can't. The wedding's too much. Too expensive. The wedding's paid for, Dad. Remember? We went over the budgets last month. Sophie stepped between us. Mark's financial situation has changed. He confided in me that he's been struggling. I'm only trying to help manage things. By taking control of his assets, Maya spoke from the doorway, phone raised. Like you did with Richard Martinez in Phoenix, or Thomas Chen in Seattle. Sophie's mask slipped for just a second, a flash of rage that confirmed everything. She recovered quickly, laughing. I don't know what you're talking about. Mark, these girls are obviously upset about the wedding. Maybe they should leave. Nobody's leaving, I said, moving to Dad's side. Emma, call Daniel. Tell him to bring his brother, the one who's a police officer. Sophie's composure cracked further. Mark, are you going to let them treat me this way, after everything I've done for you? Dad looked confused, struggling to focus. Sophie's been helping with the accounts. What accounts, Dad? I pressed. What exactly has she been helping with? I don't remember. He rubbed his temples. She said something about investment opportunities. Emma gasped from the doorway. The wedding fund. Dad, please tell me you didn't. Sophie backed toward the door, but Maya blocked her path. Going somewhere? Maybe to meet your other boyfriend in Chicago? The one you're still legally married to? The mask shattered completely. Sophie's face contorted with fury as she lunged for her purse. But I was faster, grabbing it before she could reach it. Bank statements spilled out, Dad's bank statements with transfer records highlighting thousands missing. This isn't over, Sophie hissed, shoving past Maya. You have no idea what you're dealing with. As her heels clicked down the hallway, I heard the front door slam. Emma collapsed into tears. Dad stared blankly at the scattered papers, the fog of alcohol and manipulation slowly lifting from his eyes. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Ask your father about April 15th, 1992. Some debts run deeper than money. I looked at the date, then at my broken family, and realized this was just the beginning. The date haunted me. April 15th, 1992. I'd searched Dad's office while he slept off the whiskey, but found nothing. Now, 3 days later, I sat in Maya's living room, surrounded by old newspaper archives spread across her coffee table. Your mother's accident was in '94, Maya said, scrolling through digital records. So whatever happened in '92, my phone lit up. Sophie's number. I hit ignore. That's the 8th time today, Ethan noted from his spot on the couch. Maybe we should... Got something, Maya interrupted. April 16th, 1992. Local business deal ends in tragedy. Thomas Reed, CEO of Reed Enterprises, found dead in his office. Ruled suicide after his company's collapse. She looked up. Your dad's law firm handled the bankruptcy. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text. Ask Mark about Thomas Reed's daughter. Tick-tock, Laura. The room tilted sideways. Maya, what was Reed's daughter's name? She scanned the article. Sarah. Sarah Reed. Sophie's real name, I whispered. Ethan sat forward. You think she's... The doorbell rang. Through Maya's front window, I saw Emma on the porch. Mascara streaked down her face again. I yanked the door open. "Dad's in the hospital," she choked out. "Alcohol poisoning. Sophie found him." The emergency room buzzed with fluorescent intensity. Dad lay unconscious, tubes snaking from his arms. Sophie stood by his bed, playing the devoted girlfriend perfectly for the hospital staff. "Such a shock," she said, voice dripping concern. "Finding him like that. Thank goodness I stopped by to check on him." "Cut the act," I snarled. "I know who you are, Sarah." Her expression didn't change, but her eyes went dead. "Took you long enough, Laura. Did Daddy ever mention how he destroyed my family? How he helped cover up my father's murder?" Emma stepped back. "What is she talking about?" "Your father wasn't the noble lawyer you thought," Sophie continued. "He helped his wealthy clients hide their crimes. My father discovered their scheme. 3 days later, he was dead. Suicide. And Mark Thompson made sure the truth stayed buried." "You're lying," I said, but doubt crept in. Dad's drinking had started after Mom's death, but the guilt in his eyes whenever we mentioned his early career, that had always been there. "Am I?" Sophie pulled out her phone. "I have proof. Documents, recordings. Everything your father tried to hide. One call to the police and his reputation, his freedom, gone." "What do you want?" My voice shook. "I want him to suffer like I suffered. To watch his family fall apart. To lose everything." She smiled at Emma. "Starting with your perfect little wedding. Unless what? Transfer the house to me. The one your mother left you girls. Sign it over, and I'll keep Daddy's secrets. Refuse, and I release everything. To the police, the papers, your sister's wedding guests. Your choice." Emma grabbed my arm. "Laura, what's happening?" I stared at Dad's unconscious form, then at Sophie's triumphant face. The house was all we had left of Mom, our childhood home, our inheritance. "You have 24 hours, Sophie said, gathering her purse. "Oh, and Laura? That power of attorney your father signed while drunk? Already filed. His accounts are frozen. Good luck paying for the wedding now." She sauntered out, leaving the scent of expensive perfume and destruction in her wake. Emma collapsed into a chair, sobbing. My phone buzzed. Maya had found more about Thomas Reed's death, but I couldn't look. Not yet. A nurse entered, checking Dad's vitals. "Family only after visiting hours," she said kindly. "We are family," I replied, watching Dad's chest rise and fall. "What's left of it?" Later, in the hospital parking lot, I called Maya. "I need everything you can find on Thomas Reed's death. Every detail, every person involved." "Laura," she hesitated, "what if Sophie's telling the truth? About your dad?" I watched the hospital lights flicker against the night sky. "Then we'll deal with that too. But first, I'm going to destroy her. Even if I have to burn everything down to do it." My phone lit up with another text from Sophie. "TikTok. Time to decide, your mother's house or your father's freedom. Choose wisely." I deleted the message. Sophie thought she was playing chess, but she'd forgotten one thing. In chess, the queen can fall too. Dad's hospital room felt smaller at night. I sat in the dark, watching monitors blink their steady rhythm when his eyes finally opened. "Sophie?" he croaked. "It's Laura." I leaned forward. "We need to talk about Thomas Reed." His heart monitor spiked. In the green glow of medical equipment, I watched 30 years of carefully constructed lies crumble from his face. "How did you—" "His daughter sends her regards." I placed the old newspaper clipping on his blanket. "She goes by Sophie now." Dad closed his eyes, his hands trembling. "The house. Your mother's house. That's what she wants, isn't it?" Before I could answer, Emma appeared in the doorway. "The nurses said you were awake." She paused, sensing the tension. "What's going on?" "Nothing," I said quickly. "Just talking about—" "Stop lying to me." Emma's voice cracked. Daniel's family already pulled their investment from the wedding. Sophie made sure they knew about Dad's financial troubles. I deserve to know what's happening. Dad reached for the call button, but I caught his hand. "No more running. Tell her. Tell us both about Thomas Reed." The story spilled out in whispers. Corporate fraud, embezzlement. Reed had threatened to expose everything. "It wasn't supposed to end like that," Dad said. "They just wanted to scare him. I didn't know they'd—" "Murder him?" The voice came from the doorway. Sophie stood there, elegant even at midnight, a manila envelope in her manicured hands. Funny how covering up one crime leads to another, and another. Emma stepped between them. Get out. You've done enough damage. Oh, sweetie. Sophie's smile was razor sharp. I'm just getting started. The house papers. Now. Or tomorrow morning, every news outlet in the state gets proof of your father's involvement in my father's death. My phone buzzed. Maya, found Reed's original case files. There's something you need to see. Now. You're bluffing, I said, watching Sophie carefully. You don't have proof. She opened the envelope, pulling out documents. Phone records, bank statements, your father's signature on papers that disappeared from police evidence, enough to reopen the case. Another buzz. Maya again. It wasn't your dad. Check your email. Urgent. If I sign over the house, I said slowly, buying time as I pulled out my phone. You'll destroy the evidence? Laura, no, Emma protested. Mom wanted us to— Tick-tock, Sophie sang. Dawn's coming. Reporters love a morning scandal. I opened Maya's email, scanned the attached photos. My hands started shaking. You know what's interesting about old case files? I looked up at Sophie. They include crime scene photos, including pictures of evidence that was logged but mysteriously vanished, like your father's diary. Sophie's smile faltered. Maya found copies. Fascinating reading, especially the part about how you discovered your father's embezzlement scheme, how you threatened to expose him unless he paid you off, how you visited his office the night he died. You're lying. But fear had crept into her voice. The police ruled it suicide because the security footage went missing, but one camera across the street survived. Maya found that too. I stood up. It shows you entering the building at 11:42 p.m., leaving at 12:15 a.m. Your father was found dead at 12:30. Sophie lunged for her envelope, but I was faster. Papers scattered across the floor. Blank sheets, all of them. No evidence, no proof, just an elaborate bluff. You killed your own father, I said quietly, and spent years planning revenge against an innocent man. Her composure shattered. He wasn't innocent. None of them were. They all protected each other, covered up everything. Security. Emma called out the door. We need security in here. Sophie backed toward the exit, her carefully constructed veneer cracking completely. This isn't over. I'll destroy all of you. With what? I held up my phone. Maya's story about Thomas Reed's real killer runs tomorrow morning. Your choice. Leave now and never come back, or stay and face the consequences. She ran. In the silence that followed, Emma collapsed into a chair. Dad stared at the scattered blank papers, tears streaming down his face. My phone buzzed one last time. Maya, police want to talk to you, both about Sophie and about what really happened in '92. What do you want me to tell them? I looked at my broken family, at the wreckage of Sophie's revenge, and realized some truths are better left buried. Tell them, I typed back, to focus on the murder she committed. The rest stays in the past. Dawn was breaking outside the hospital windows. Sometimes revenge consumes the avenger first. Police tape fluttered across my father's office door like yellow warning flags. Inside, Detective Chen methodically photographed the chaos. Drawers ransacked, papers strewn, computer screen shattered. Sophie's work? Maya whispered beside me. I nodded, watching the detective document the wreckage. She came back for something specific. Miss Mitchell, Chen gestured me over. These filing cabinets were opened with a key. Any idea how Ms. Reed obtained one? My stomach twisted. Dad's spare keys had vanished from my purse during the hospital confrontation. I'd been so focused on exposing Sophie's lies, I'd missed her sleight of hand. No idea, I lied, catching Maya's sharp glance. What was she looking for? Better question is what she found. Chen held up an empty folder labeled 92R. Your father kept detailed records. My phone buzzed. Emma, Daniel's family wants to postpone the wedding. Need you home now. Go, Maya said. I'll stay. See what else turns up. Home was worse. Emma sat surrounded by wedding magazines, tears streaming as she deleted RSVPs on her laptop. Daniel paced behind her, tie loose, hair disheveled. My parents think we should wait, he said quietly, until things settle. Things like my father being investigated for murder? Emma's voice cracked. Or his psychotic ex-girlfriend breaking into his office. My phone lit up. Unknown number? Found what I needed. Asked Daddy about Catherine Reed. Time for the real story. Laura? Emma noticed my expression. What is it? The front door opened. Dad shuffled in, looking older than his years. Girls, we need to talk. About Catherine Reed? I held up my phone. Sophie's mother? He collapsed into his chair, the weight of decades pressing him down. I should have told you everything that night in the hospital. Then tell us now, Emma demanded. Catherine Reed was Thomas's wife. After his death, she knew things about the firm's dealings. She threatened to expose everything unless, he rubbed his face, unless we paid her to stay quiet. You paid her off? My voice shook. No. I arranged for her to have an accident, the same way we arranged Thomas's suicide. His words hung in the air like poison. Sophie wasn't just after revenge for her father. She wanted justice for her mother, too. Daniel backed away, horror etched across his face. I need some air. Emma didn't even watch him leave. How many others, Dad? How many accidents? Before he could answer, Maya burst through the door. Laura, the police found something. Financial records showing regular payments to offshore accounts starting in '92. Millions of dollars, all traced back to my mother's house. I finished, the pieces clicking into place. That's why Sophie wanted it so badly. The proof was hidden there all along. Dad's phone rang. His hands trembled as he answered. Yes, I understand. I'll cooperate fully. Emma stood, wedding magazines sliding to the floor. What's happening? They're reopening both cases, he whispered. Thomas and Catherine Reed. Sophie gave them everything. My phone buzzed one final time. Check the loose floorboard in your mother's room. The truth about her death is there too. Happy hunting, sister. The word sister hit me like a physical blow. I stared at Dad, understanding dawning with horrific clarity. Catherine Reed wasn't just Thomas's wife, was she? She was your lover. And Sophie is your half-sister, he confirmed. And now she's going to destroy everything I built to protect you girls. Unless what? He pulled out an envelope. There's a private plane waiting at the municipal airport. Enough cash to disappear. Help me run, Laura. One last time. Emma's sob cut through the room. Maya's hand found mine, steadying me as I faced my father. This stranger who'd built our lives on murder and lies. Detective Chen, I called out the door, knowing she'd followed Maya here. He's all yours. As they led him away, I watched Emma crumple into Maya's arms, her wedding dreams shattering like the family myths we'd believed all our lives. My phone lay heavy in my hand, Sophie's last message glowing. Now you know what real revenge feels like. Welcome to the family, sister. The truth had won, but victory tasted like ashes in my mouth. The loose floorboard in Mom's old room came up easily, as if waiting all these years for this moment. Inside lay a single envelope, yellowed with age, addressed to me in my mother's handwriting. My phone buzzed. Sophie, read it yet? Time's running out before the wedding. Emma's wedding. Despite everything, she'd insisted on going forward, moving it to the small chapel where Mom and Dad had married. In 6 hours, she'd walk down that aisle, pretending our family hadn't imploded. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Mom's familiar script flowed across the page. My dearest Laura, if you're reading this, then the truth about Catherine Reed has finally surfaced. The words blurred as I read. Mom had known everything. Dad's affair, Catherine's pregnancy, the subsequent cover-up. She'd gathered evidence, planning to expose it all until... My phone lit up again. Detective Chen. Need you at the station. New evidence about your mother's accident. The letter slipped from my fingers. It wasn't an accident. It had never been an accident. Maya found me sitting on Mom's bedroom floor an hour later. Laura, Emma's looking for you. The makeup artist is... What's wrong? I handed her the letter, watched her face change as she read. Jesus, she whispered. Your dad didn't just cover up the murders. He orchestrated them. Both of them. And Sophie knew. My voice sounded distant, hollow. She's been playing us from the start. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. For both our mothers. My phone buzzed again. Emma, where are you? Everything's falling apart. Daniel's family is threatening to leave. Please. You have to tell her, Maya said softly. Before Sophie does. Tell her what? That our father murdered our mother? That her wedding day is built on a foundation of lies? I stood up, rage finally breaking through the numbness. Or maybe I should tell her that Sophie, the woman we've been fighting, is actually the hero of this story? Laura. No, I won't destroy her day. Not like this. The chapel was a blur of white flowers and nervous energy. Emma stood before the mirror in Mom's restored wedding dress, radiant despite everything. You're late, she said, catching my reflection. But you're here. That's all that matters. The church bells began to toll. 5 hours until the ceremony. My phone. Final chance, sister. Tell her the truth or I will, in front of everyone. I looked at Emma, at her desperate grip on happiness, and made my decision. I need to show you something. But before I could reach for the letter, the dressing room door burst open. Sophie stood there, elegant in black, holding a manila envelope. Sorry to crash the party, she said, but it's time for a family reunion. Emma's face went pale. Security. They won't come, Sophie smiled, but the police will. I've given them everything. The evidence about Thomas Reed, Catherine, your mother's accident. They're on their way now. Get out. I stepped forward, but Sophie held up her hand. You still don't get it, do you? I'm not the villain here. I'm just the daughter who watched her mother die, then spent 20 years gathering evidence while her father's killer walked free, just like you. The truth hit Emma first. She staggered, gripping the vanity for support. What is she talking about? Sophie tossed the envelope at her feet. Crime scene photos spilled out. Mom's car, the tampered brake lines. Dad's signature on documents authorizing the cover-up. No, Emma whispered. Laura, tell me she's lying. I reached for Mom's letter, but Sophie was faster. Oh, this? She snatched it from my hand. Let me read it for you. My dearest Laura, if you're reading this, then the truth about Catherine Reed has finally surfaced. Outside, police sirens wailed closer. Emma collapsed into a chair, her white dress pooling around her like spilled milk. The church bells tolled again, marking another hour closer to a wedding that would never happen. And Sophie stood in the doorway, triumphant at last, holding the final pieces of our shattered family in her manicured hands. Tick-tock, she said softly. Time to decide. Who's the real monster in this story? The sirens grew louder. Emma's tears fell on her white dress, and I stood frozen between them, realizing that sometimes there is no right side in a war of revenge, only survivors and casualties. The chapel erupted into chaos as police burst through the doors. Emma's white dress disappeared into the crowd of fleeing guests, while Sophie stood at the altar, Mom's letter raised like a victory flag. Ladies and gentlemen, she called out, her voice carrying over the panic. I believe it's time for the real ceremony to begin. I lunged forward, but Ethan caught my arm. Laura, wait. Your father couldn't be here today, Sophie continued, addressing the stunned remaining guests. He's currently explaining to police how he murdered my mother and his wife, all to protect his precious reputation. Detective Chen appeared at the side door, officers flanking her, but Sophie wasn't finished. But the best part? She locked eyes with me. Laura knew. She found the proof and chose to hide it, to protect her sister's perfect day, just like Daddy taught her. That's not true. Emma's voice cracked from the back of the church. She stood with Daniel, his arm around her protectively. Laura would never. Show them, Sophie demanded. Show them the letter, or I will. My hands trembled as I reached for the envelope, but Maya's voice cut through the tension. Wait, there's something you need to see first. She projected a video onto the chapel wall, security footage from Dad's office, but not from the recent break-in. This was older, dated the night Thomas Reed died. Sophie's triumphant smile faltered as she watched her younger self enter her father's office. Watched herself remove something from his desk. Watched him discover her, their silent confrontation playing out in grainy black and white. You didn't just find evidence of his crimes, Maya said quietly. You found proof he was going to turn himself in. That's why you confronted him that night. Turn it off, Sophie snarled. He was going to confess everything, Maya continued. About the fraud, about Catherine, about all of it. But you couldn't let that happen, could you? Because then everyone would know your mother wasn't an innocent victim. She was part of the scheme from the start. The letter slipped from Sophie's fingers. I caught it before it hit the ground, finally reading the last lines Mom had written. Catherine Reed wasn't murdered, Laura. She killed herself after Thomas discovered her role in the embezzlement. Your father covered it up to protect you girls from the truth, that sometimes the people we think are victims are actually the architects of their own destruction. Sophie's composure shattered. She lunged for the letter, but I sidestepped. We grappled at the altar, years of pain and revenge crystallizing into this moment. You wanted justice? I gasped as she clawed at my face. Or did you just want someone to blame? He took everything from me. No, I grabbed her wrists. You did that yourself, just like your mother. She screamed, a raw, primal sound that echoed off the chapel walls. As Detective Chen moved in, Sophie broke free, running toward the vestry door. But Emma stood in her way, still beautiful in her ruined wedding dress. You're right, Emma said softly. Our father is a monster. But so are you. Sophie froze, something breaking in her expression. When the officers led her away, she looked small, diminished, just another daughter destroyed by the sins of her parents. The chapel emptied slowly. Daniel held Emma as she cried. Maya gathered the scattered evidence of our family's destruction, and I stood at the altar, Mom's letter heavy in my hands. What happens now? Ethan asked, joining me. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed one last time. A message from Dad, sent from custody. I'm sorry, for everything, but mostly for teaching you that love means protecting lies. I looked at Emma, at the ruins of her wedding, at the spot where Sophie had stood declaring victory. Then I deleted Dad's message without responding. Now? I took Ethan's hand. Now we stop protecting lies and start rebuilding truth. Outside, police lights painted the chapel steps in alternating red and blue. Emma stepped into the sun, lifting her face to its warmth, and somewhere in the distance, church bells tolled, not for a wedding, but for an ending, and maybe, just maybe, a beginning. The courthouse steps felt colder than they should in September. Dad's sentencing had taken less than an hour, 20 years for conspiracy and obstruction of justice. Sophie got 12, with the possibility of parole. Neither looked at me as they were led away. Emma sat beside me now, both of us watching the sunset paint the courthouse columns in shades of amber. She'd postponed the wedding indefinitely, but kept the ring. Daniel had surprised us all by staying. I found more letters, she said quietly, in Mom's old jewelry box, one for each birthday we'd have after she was gone. My hands tightened on the stone step. Did you read them? Not yet, but there's one marked for when the truth comes out. She pulled an envelope from her purse. I thought maybe we could read it together. Before I could answer, Maya appeared at the bottom of the steps waving a file. Laura, there's something you need to see. No. The word came out sharper than intended. Whatever it is, more evidence, more secrets, I don't want to know. Maya hesitated. It's about Catherine Reed. There might have been another. Stop. I stood up, feeling the weight of all the revelations, all the destruction they'd caused. Some truths don't set you free. They just start new cycles of revenge. Emma touched my arm. Laura, look what the truth did to Sophie, to us, to everyone. I gestured at the courthouse where our father would spend the next 2 decades. Maybe Mom knew that. Maybe that's why she left us letters instead of evidence. Maya sat down beside Emma, placing the file between them. So we just bury it, like they did? No. I picked up Mom's final letter. We acknowledge it. Then we choose what to do with it. The envelope opened easily, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Mom's handwriting flowed across the page, stronger than in her last letter. My dearest girls, by now you know about the lies, the crimes, the tangled web of revenge that destroyed so many lives. But here's the truth that matters. Love and justice aren't always the same thing. Sometimes pursuing one means sacrificing the other. The trick is knowing which to choose and when to stop the cycle of pain. I chose love. I chose to leave you letters of hope instead of evidence of despair. I chose to believe you would find your own way to truth in your own time. Choose wisely, my daughters. Choose love. Emma wiped tears from her cheeks. What do we do now? I looked at the file Maya had brought, then at the courthouse where Sophie and Dad would serve their sentences. Finally, I looked at the setting sun, painting everything in shades of possibility. We choose, I said, picking up the file. Without opening it, I tore it in half, then again, letting the pieces scatter in the evening breeze. We choose to end it here. Maya nodded slowly, understanding. Emma clutched Mom's letter closer. My phone buzzed, a text from Ethan. Dinner's ready when you are, all of you. We stood together on the courthouse steps, 3 women carrying different pieces of the same broken story. Behind us, justice had been served, however imperfectly. Before us lay the harder task, learning to live with the aftermath of revenge. I kept the dress, Emma said suddenly. Not Mom's one, it was too damaged, but mine, for when I'm ready. For when we're all ready, I corrected, taking her hand. As we walked down the steps, I thought about Sophie in her cell, Dad in his, both trapped in prisons built from decades of revenge. I thought about Mom, writing letters instead of accusations, choosing love over justice. Maya linked her arm through mine. You know there will always be more secrets, more truths waiting to surface. I know. I watched the last pieces of the file dance away on the wind, but we get to decide what to do with them when they come. The sunset painted our shadows long across the courthouse lawn, 3 shadows walking away from the past, toward whatever future we chose to build from the wreckage of revenge. Behind us, Mom's letter rustled in Emma's purse, its final words a whisper of possibility. Choose love. And so we did.